Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to day 3 of Republic Day Forensics training for speech, which is original oratory. Today, I'm going to show you NSDA videos, but I'm also going to give you a couple of exercises, and you're going to tell me as to how you would approach it. But also, we're going to have a couple of a bunch of discussion points for the video that we're going to watch. So credits to NSDA for their finals video. It's also available on YouTube. I'm going to probably put in more links. But I want you all to see this video.
Wizard number 5 is code
Before
1.
that, can you guys hear it? Is it audible?
Yes, ma'am, it's audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. I'm gonna put it to exactly to the place where it starts. He starts speaking. Okay.
In April of last year, I was in my living room watching a Black Lives Matter demonstration unfold on TV. Protesters demanded justice in one corner while police stared solemnly from the other. And that's when something unforgettable happened. Seemingly out of nowhere, a young woman emerged from the crowd, boldly approached an officer, and handed him a peace offering. The whole world seemed to hold its breath as she claimed her Tiananmen Square moment. And I, along with millions, wondered who exactly this brave soul was. And that's when I realized, that's Kendall Jenner. Noted Kardashian reality star turned supermodel, starring in a Pepsi commercial. I don't even need to tell you what happened next, because you know that upon receiving their Pepsis, both protesters and police became one. Dancing, high-fiving, singing a Kardashian kumbaya. And now, I am pleased to announce that Black lives finally matter. Up next, Kylie Jenner ends Islamophobia with a can of Mountain Dew. Yeah, it should come as no surprise that upon airing, this ad was met with a tidal wave of backlash against its many faults. But Nathaniel Friedman of the New York Times pointed out something insightful when he wrote that the ad oversimplified a complex racial movement into something trite and easily fixed. Because unfortunately, in a world where simplicity reigns supreme, this habit of oversimplification transcends advertising. And that's my concern. I fear that today, we oversimplify the inherently complex with disturbing frequency, be it politically or personally. Gone is our appreciation of nuance and depth, replaced instead with a national appetite for sound bites and slogans. To put it simply, we put things too simply. And in the process, journalist Byron Williams explains that we begin to seek the easy answer, even when the difficult one, however elusive, is most necessary. So today, let's examine how we oversimplify. First, issues, and next, people. Then we'll discuss the harms of doing so, before finally coming up with some not-so-simple solutions. So don't get me wrong. Pepsi is not the only one guilty of oversimplifying race in America. Last year, Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner proved his commitment to racial equality by walking on stage in Chicago and chugging a glass of chocolate milk. As he drank, the governor said, and I quote, diversity. That actually happened. And though that sounds crazy, like him, we often oversimplify issues and end up minimizing them. Don't believe me? Well, how many times have you heard someone debunk global warming by citing the robust evidence that it's cold outside? We do this with every issue under the sun. In fact, just last January, while discussing immigration policy, TV pundit Tomi Lahren argued for border security by stating that it's simple. The same way we lock the doors to our houses at night, we ought to lock the doors to our country as well. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think Tomi Lahren likes chocolate milk. I mean, really, immigration is the job of 22 federal agencies and can't possibly be reduced to such a facile analogy. Now, for that matter, neither can the gun debate. But that doesn't stop millions from echoing the line we've all heard. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Which sounds true enough, but as articulated by Dr. David Kyle Johnson of King's College, this defense cleverly evades the fact that guns make it substantially easier for people to kill people. You know, the fact is, when we adopt such simplistic rhetoric, it's not just the issues we oversimplify, but their solutions as well. You want to put a stop to illegal immigration? Great. Build a wall, crime will fall. And if you want to end school shootings, then just arm the teachers. You know, these so-called solutions are little more than Band-Aids for bullet wounds. They don't solve anything. They just deny us the rational discourse we deserve. Now, we don't just oversimplify to minimize issues, but also to marginalize the people we don't like or agree with. Frankly, it's what Hillary Clinton did when she referred to millions of Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables, as if their stories were all exactly the same. And we routinely do this to each other, constructing narratives that are appealingly simple, but mistaken. It's why 1 in 3 Americans believe that the root of poverty is laziness. Because it's just easier to blame low-income people for their plight than it is to address the complex inequities that force them into it. We have begun to argue down what author Michael Lysak calls the path of least resistance, not only reducing people to talking points, but bypassing reason. And it's not just illogical, it's reductive. It's reductive when the Department of Health and Human Services intentionally defines gender in the simplest possible terms, thereby eliminating the federal protections of transgender people. And it's reductive when a former senator tells the teenage survivors of a school shooting that instead of making Congress solve their problem, why can't they just learn CPR? These oversimplifications accomplish nothing besides marginalizing people and trivializing their strife. And I hope we can all agree that that is deplorable. Yeah, I have no doubt that the harms of this habit have been felt by each of us. But the harm I fear most, the one most responsible for eroding nuance and wrecking our discourse, is the false dichotomy, wherein we insist that answers must be either black or white, left or right, and nothing in between. Yesterday's complexities become the binaries of tomorrow. If that sounds abstract, it isn't. I've lived it. When then-candidate Trump proposed his Muslim ban in 2016, my neighbor told me that I had nothing to fear because I was one of the good ones. I have to ask, were the 50 Muslims slaughtered in a New Zealand mosque 3 months ago good ones or bad ones? When she said that, I felt so diminished. But what really struck me is that she didn't intend to hurt me. Her words lacked malice, but they were injected with bias. And that's what makes this so insidious. We often don't mean to oversimplify, it's just so easy to. And along the way, whatever our intent, communities are categorized, issues minimized, and people, you and me, are dehumanized. So how do we solve this? Well, the simple answer is, we can't. It'd be absurd of me to denounce quick fixes and simple solutions in one breath and then offer them in the next. So I won't. But I will suggest this. We are not neatly drawn people living in a neatly drawn nation. Our lives are rife with contradiction and ambiguity at every turn. So how can we ensure that our discourse and our politics reflect that? Well, I believe that starts with rejecting the oversimplified false binaries presented to us in America today. What does that mean? Well, take the issues of our time. It means believing the radical notion that we can uphold the Second Amendment and at the same time we can end gun violence once and for all. It's not either or. We can protect our borders and we can treat immigrants and asylum seekers with the compassion they deserve. And most importantly, as Americans, we can love Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. It's not mutually exclusive. Let us not be tricked by the false choices meant to divide us. Next, in our own lives, we must make a commitment to meaningful communication. You know, the farther away you stand from something, the simpler it seems. So be it on Twitter or at Thanksgiving dinner, the next time you find yourself debating the other side, get close. You know, not physically, that's assault, but ask questions. Engage with the intent to learn and not persuade. Try verbally reiterating the other person's point to them so as to ensure you don't oversimplify their argument. And the next time you hear the words, simply put, ask yourself, can this actually be put simply? If so, great. But I'd ask you to consider the simplest equation of all. 1 + 1 = 2. That's pretty basic, right? Well, what if I told you that the mathematical proof for that equation is 372 pages long? 70 years ago, Albert Einstein told us we ought to make our world as simple as possible, but no simpler. And he was right. In a world whose extraordinary beauty is thanks to its complexity, we owe that to each other. And that is as simple as it gets.
All right, then, what do you guys think about the video? Any thoughts? So I'm going to, okay, Saket, what's your initial thought? And then we're going to discuss specifically what we feel about each part of the speech. Saket, Ram, go ahead.
Ma'am, initially all I can think is human, ma'am.
Yeah.
And I really liked not physically, that's assault, ma'am.
Yeah, that was a good part as well. So we all agree that it was a very, like, at least like a humorous speech, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but I want to continue with a couple of questions I'm going to ask you guys. Okay, let's start with this. If you have the answer, just raise your hand. I'm going to ask you about it. So, introduction of this speech, what do you think, which technique they used? Niyati? Okay, Ria?
He gave if I can say a story, but he gave an example which kind of relates to the topic which he was talking about.
So I would basically say, because I think he was trying to relate it to what happened with him. So it's actually an anecdote. So he started with an anecdote, which was actually also humorous, which immediately gathered like attention to people and people started laughing. He also like paused for like responding to the to the response that was actually coming from the audience. So he started with anecdote, and that was his strategy of speech. In terms of context, did you figure out that he was going to talk about okay, yeah. So did you figure out that it was going to be oversimplification of movements and issues in the context, and how do you think he set it up? So if you noticed, there was a very smooth transition from the anecdote to the BLM movement, where he was basically like talking about the issue of oversimplification through chugging of milk. And he also then specifically stated as to what the issue and what the topic is. But then he obviously did not say my topic today is, but his transitions in the way in the speech was proceeding was very smooth. So in terms of him setting up the context, he gave a lot of examples of the status quo and what's happening in the current scenario. And then he moved forward with a case split. So he told that in his speech, he's going to talk about oversimplification of complex issues. He said he's going to talk about what's the problem. He's going to talk about the issues, and then he's going to talk about how it harms people and the issue itself. And then he's going to talk about the harms of it and the solution of it at the end. So he gave a full case split. So you already knew what to expect from his speech in and of itself. Now, now moving towards the body of his speech, did anyone notice how he actually structured his body? Like, can anyone tell me some parts of his body or argumentation that he gave? Did anyone see it? So even if his topic was about oversimplification of complex issues, he actually covered a bunch of topics under that umbrella. For example, he talked about global warming, he talked about immigration, illegal immigration, he talks about shooting, school shooting, he talked about poverty. So he talked about multiple issues. And then he said about, and he also gave a large chunk of real life examples as to where it happens and why that issue exists. And once he's done with giving you a full body of what the issue is, he goes forward and specifically gives you 3 reasons as to why that harms. So his first harm was marginalization of people, second was like creation of false dichotomy, and third was dehumanization of issues and people. So I, as a person who's listening to it, was able to clearly understand his structure. But at the end of the day, like at the end of entire thing of what he said, he also gave solution. Now, if you notice the way how he gave solutions was obviously he did not dwell a lot upon it, but because his aim was to tell you that there's a crucial issue that exists and why is that a crucial issue. So his objective wasn't to give you a solution, because he also agreed that there's probably not, like, there probably does not exist a solution, but he did try to say as to, like, if at all we had to do something about it, the way to do it is probably, and then he tell you 3 things. One is like healthy discourse, meaningful conversations, communication, and then also rejection of oversimplification whenever you come across that. So that's how he also gave solutions to it. Now, at the end of the day, like, how do you think he ended his speech, and did you like his ending? Give your opinions. You could be critical. I think anything and everything is right. So, in my opinion, I love the part where he ends the entire thing with a conclusion of 1 + 1 = 2, and how that's not that simple and people just perceive it as being simple. I found it really nice. However, in terms of his ending statement, probably that wasn't that impactful. So I think his closing in terms of conclusion was pretty good, but his closing statement, in my opinion, could have been better. Like, something more impactful could have been made. But I think he did not need it specifically for this speech, is because his closing statement was, that's as simple as it gets, which could be a fine enough way, because the entire tone of the speech was set that way. So that's about the observations that I wanted you to make when you see any video related to this event that you're going to do. Now, obviously, I'm not going to play the second video. I want you to actually figure it out and watch it by yourself and learn from it the way how I analyze the video. But I still, and that's the easiest and simplest thing to do right now. I want you to tell me his techniques for delivery and how did you think he do in terms of delivery, like manner. Yeah, Ria.
I think he spoke about such an important topic, but in a very simplified level. Generally people when they give a speech, they tend to use like high profile language, which like
Yeah.
a normal person wouldn't understand. And he gave a lot of anecdotes, as you said in your
Hmm.
analysis. So then the anecdotes kind of made it simpler for a layman to like understand what he was talking about, and he didn't like yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so I think he used simple language. I think the reason why you need to use simple language in original oratory is because your idea is to convince people, and you can't convince and persuade people if they don't understand what you're saying. So fancy English you don't need to use in original oratory. Yes, Devanshi?
Yeah, what Riya said was absolutely like right that he have used simple language. One more thing what I found was very nice is that he used humor in between his
Yeah,
speech, which made the speech more attractive and people would were loving to listen it. So
yeah.
yeah, that was also a main point
That's
of
also a good way of like delivery strategy. I also want you to understand that when he was talking about Muslim shootings, did you see how his tone changed? His tone became really low, sad, empathetic, all of that. So that's also a way how you have to like modify your voice. Obviously, he also had good amount of pause, so like he won't go on and on. So the idea about, and that's also something that people teach whenever you do things like stand-up comedy and stuff like that. So whenever you're making a joke, you need to like stop for a bit so that people actually laugh and respond to that. So and at times he was not just like stopping for the joke, he was also stopping for like at times when he would make like a satirical statement, he would also like people would clap for him and so on and so forth. So no, like where exactly you think you were going to get that response. He was also not standing in one place, he was walking around. He was also like using his hands, but they weren't like too overwhelming. He was using hands and hand gestures, but they weren't overwhelming. So there's a thin line between you being over expressive with your hands, and there's like a whole bunch of like you just using your hands altogether. The idea behind that is that if you overuse your hands, it just distracts the listeners from what you're actually saying. So try to not do that as well. Um, I'm now going to go ahead and ask you more questions, which are going to be for. Okay, I want you to actually make introduction for this particular topic. So if the topic is truthfulness leads to a just society, think for like 2 minutes and then try to share your ideas with me.
excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
What was the topic once again?
Truthfulness leads to a good, fair society.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one more minute and then we'll start discussion. Okay, let's discuss. So what do you think? How can you introduce? So it's gonna be this like no, if nobody's gonna respond, I'm gonna have to probably end the session and I'm not gonna continue with the activity. Because the prep and mock is for you, not for me.
Now I came up with a slide starting, ma'am, but I can't really see how to get further into it, ma'am.
Just give me the idea, I'll help you.
Ma'am, I was thinking we should start with the quote, honesty is the best policy, ma'am.
Okay.
I was about to see, our elders have already decided that this is the best policy in the world. But if you look around you, how many people actually follow this?
Hmm.
And then I would wait for a minute, and then I would say, not that many, right?
You'll wait for a minute.
No, like metaphorically, ma'am. Like
Okay.
yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
And
So
then
I think yeah,
I would take an anecdote from my own life, ma'am, and I would say, for example, when I was writing an exam, I noticed that I had made a mistake, but my teacher had put it as correct, and so I went and clarified this, and she thanked me for pointing this out. She told me that many people, mostly, they are like, look, the ma'am has put it as correct, so we should just leave it. I don't want to lose marks. But she said that I have done really well because I have told her I have been honest. So she praised me on that, ma'am. So I thought I could include that as well.
yeah, that's a good
But then I
anecdote to
don't know
you.
where to go from there, ma'am.
So I mean, I think if you're transitioning the introduction with an anecdote, just go forward with like giving multiple other examples. So go ahead with like multiple other interactions and then try to tell us to why at that point of time. So people would probably think that like lying at that point of time would have been helpful, but then you could also tell us to why at that particular time, even if lying at the moment was the best thing to do, it's still okay for you to be true.
Then I could say, of course, I could have just lied and kept my higher marks. But of course, we all know that if you lie, you will lead to a train of lies, and you will just and the further you go, the more you will feel like you're in a pit that you cannot dig out. So I felt that it is best to just stay to the truth, stick to the truth, and just be over with it.
Yeah, so the idea is that most people would probably lie at that point of time because of the competition that exists, which means that everybody wants to score good. But the idea is that if you continue to do that once, you will like who will stop you from cheating an exam later, right? Because you just want to score good. But then that at the point of time when you were truthful to yourself and to your teacher, I think the teacher recognized that you are a very honest person, which anyways like acts as a
To
very
gain
good motivation.
appreciation in the class.
Yeah. But B, I think it also helps you with respect to, just creating a moral compass for yourself, that this is not something I probably want to be a better student or,
And
even if
ma'am,
it.
I also considered about lying there, but then I realized that it's best to just stick to the truth because the teacher is also working hard, and I don't
Yeah.
want to give her a hard time. And plus, eventually they would probably figure out, and they would be like, he did not tell at that time. Why did he not do this? He should have surely noticed.
So, I mean, I think this particular instance is something which people can also relate to. Like, so I'll be interested to know what you did at that point of time. So, and I think most people would have probably had this experience. I had this experience as well. But for me, like the good part was the teacher was so impressed. She just let me have that mark and she did not reduce the mark. So she's like, yeah, good for you. Yes, Devanshi.
Okay. If I have to start, I'll first say a line that truthfulness, a fundamental, wait, a fundament, wait, just a second. Okay.
Yeah.
when I'll start my speech with truthfulness, a fundamental principle for a fair and equitable society.
Yes.
And then I'll ask a question. We all feel that, right? Then after a second, I'll switch to an anecdote telling the story we all must have heard in our childhood about the man who was fooling his
That person, Pinocchio.
no, not Pinocchio.
Then,
A man who was fooling his village people.
oh yeah, the wolf. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
About briefing about that story, like telling it in a short.
That's very interesting. Yes, that's
Telling
a
it,
good beginning.
yeah, and then letting people know that how when he was lying, and after some time the people stopped believing him.
Hmm.
When the problem actually came, when the lion actually came to his village to eat his
Yeah.
sheep,
Yeah.
nobody came to help him.
Hmm.
And then I'll further continue.
That's a good way to start. Niyati, what's your take?
Yes, so I thought to start with something funny, a funny scenario, a funny, like imaginative scenario. So first, let me speak that, and I'll tell you what I had in my mind. So I'll be starting with, folks, imagine a scenario that in tomorrow's speech, Mr. PM says, "Dear brothers and sisters of my India, I, the PM of your country, would like to pay a thank you fees of 50,000 K in every account because of the taxes you've paid me." And then and then you find zero money in your account tomorrow. What feelings would you have, folks? Of aggression, frustration? Well, it's obvious, right? Then I thought that I could link it with the condition of the middle class of the country, and then tell that the policies which the government sometimes proposes, it doesn't really pay a good amount of attention to the middle class, and that they are just in a false persona of that their lives will get improved and all. So this would be my context, and my whole declamation would be based on something like this.
I loved how you used like macro level truthfulness. You also tried to incorporate things like accountability with truthfulness. That was really, really smart. But is there anyone in the meet who would want to take the opposite like take and be like, yeah, listen, it's okay to lie sometimes? I would have done that.
Sorry, could you repeat it?
Is there somebody in the meet who would want to like take an opposite stance in the speech and be like, hey, lying sometimes is okay? Because I just gave you a prompt. You could literally say truthfulness does not lead to a fair society. Nobody, all of y'all are like fully truthful people. All right. So the idea was that I was trying to suggest was that you don't have to always take the positive view. You can also be like pessimistic, and you could also have like an opposite view insofar as you can just justify it. All right, good job with the introduction. I think you have understood what was going to be the case. Moving forward is going to be the context. How would you make a context? Build the context for this particular topic. Now, your topic could like your context could be different. And obviously, like I think somebody already mentioned it, that they would give a large chunk of examples to set context as to why truthfulness is important. For example, you like a doctor like being truthful to the patient about like whether he's going to survive or not after the operation, being honest and like being candid about what's going to happen in the operation. That's also one of the instructions. It could just simply be a parent who wants to not just be like, hey, you're going to get candy if you do your assignment, but the idea is that if you don't give him candy after the assignment, the person is literally going to lose his interest in the assignment ever, and he would probably not even believe you later. So there are multiple things how like this could be your way how you want to set up context, and all of the examples that I gave to you was all about like faith in human relationships, which means that the reason as to why truthfulness is important is because faith is built on the idea that you presume and assume that people are going to be truthful to you. And at the point of time when you're not being truthful, and people figure it out one day or like someday or other, it basically hurts them and it makes them like have trust issues with human relationships and so on and so forth. And for example, I could also set context of like saying that, hey, probably lying in general is not a bad thing per se, because it's inherent to your it's inherent to human nature. For example, when you see a 3-year-old baby eating a cake, and you ask the baby, did you eat the cake, and the baby saying no, like that's baby does not know that he's lying, but he's just lying, right? So you can't just simply say that like people always have malicious intent when they're lying. So yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways you can form context. I didn't want to go much into context because I think that's something they've already told me. Now let's start to make arguments, and let's see what statistics or what examples would you give. Now, in this context, I actually want who was that person who said, I'm going to use things like politicians and the manifesto that they use? Whose idea was that? Was it Niyati?
Yeah, idea of those politicians and all.
Yeah. So I would
Yeah.
probably, if you I were you, I would start making arguments on like the implication of it. For example, um, there were times when people would say things like, what, I'm gonna in a village saying that, like in your pipelines you won't have water, you'll have milk. And the implication of it becomes that you're creating bars for the people so high that people realize that you're lying, and people know that you're just showing them like a big picture which you would never be able to like achieve. So I think that could be one of the examples, and like I literally can quote who that person was, like who that politician was. Similarly, I could also talk about um other examples. Give me examples. How are you going to set up your body?
Yeah, right. So while writing this introduction only, I had this thing in my mind. So like,
Mm.
I don't know if anyone over here knows that that in the times of COVID, like there used to be a lot of news that Mr. Modi would be like, you know, putting some amount of money in accounts of everybody, or he'll be
Yeah, yeah.
giving rupees 500 to
Mm.
all the women in the country. So like I thought that this was a quite tall claim which was never really fulfilled, and it was just built on sand, and of course it would not have been possible in a country which is whose population is in crores. So that's why I thought I could give this idea and tell that how untruthfulness in this thing led
Mm.
to so many things and all,
Since you
after
gave
this.
this example, actually, I got another example from COVID times only. What ended up happening was that there was so much misinformation spreading by people about, how you can cure COVID, who's spreading COVID, about governmental policies, lockdowns, etc. Which is called like, and misinformation in general is bad. But what is misinformation at the end of the day? People are lying, right? So, and misinformation creates so much chaos in the society. For example, like literally people killing each other, people being violent to each other, and so on and so forth. Which means you can also take one of the arguments saying that truthfulness could literally avoid a large chunk of chaos in the society as well. And then you can give like an example of like how many people died because of misinformation in a particular place.
Right now, like you said, set an example of dying, right? That
Yeah.
misinformation can lead to dying of people. So, like during the French Revolution, also when it was
Mhm.
going to start, I could give an example from the history that when the French Revolution was going to start, then there was a rumor that was spread that the people of the king would come and destroy all the crops in the countryside. So people started killing everyone,
Yeah.
uh, all the clergy and the church members. So I could add that as well and connect
Yeah.
it to the real world.
Yeah. Um, so the implication of it again becomes that, had people been truthful there, this particular thing wouldn't have happened. So that's the way how you would frame it as well. That's how you would make your body then. Then anecdotes, I think Sakit already gave one anecdote. You can literally give any anecdote you want to. Closing statement. I want you to find a closing statement. For this, if you want to use a Google, I think you can go ahead. I also think of a closing statement for this one. think I got one. Does anyone here have one? If not, I can give you my example then, and then you can think about yours. So I was thinking about me picturizing this entire idea about how humans are like pile of cards, and where, let's say, if you're stacking one card over the other, the ability of the cards to stand on itself is dependent on the other card, which means humans are very interdependent on each other. At a point in time when you know that the root of this relationship is based on a false premise, or at a point in time when you know that the cards in the root level are the weakest, it just makes and impacts all the other cards in the deck, which means that when one person in society lies, it impacts a large chunk of people. That basically means you ruin the ability of humanity to actually trust each other, and therefore it's bad. So very rough idea, but I could probably frame it this way. All right, then I think that was like probably it. I just had to give you a bunch of examples, bunch of ways how you can approach it. Are there any doubts with respect to your theme then? Have you all started preparing? How is it going? Did anyone start preparing?
It's important to include each and every criteria which you told.
No, it's not, because you don't have that much time at all, right? So 4 minutes for you, how much will you speak? You can just give like one anecdote at max. You can also, so it's gonna be, let's say if you wanna, so if you're gonna, so I want you to spend more amount of time in body, obviously. So at least spend 2 minutes, 30 seconds in the body. Rest is yours. Use introduction. So I would just say that, like the best way to like involve everything would probably be using anecdote in the introduction. So you're like doing two things at once. I would also say that when you're giving issues and some solutions, go ahead and like just make it in one-liners and not necessarily explaining as to how that would be happening. So your understanding should be, you're supposed to explain the body the best, and then the other things are just like supplementary. They're not the most important. So I want you to focus more on why is that a crucial issue, the solutions to which you can give in one lines, because that's not your objective, but do add solutions. So yeah.
How
Okay,
many
then
arguments should we give for a 6 minute speech?
for 6 minute speech, I think 3 for sure. 3, 4. 4 is like a good number.
Okay, and how much time should we spend on analyzing those?
Okay, let's see. You have 6 minutes, and I would say just save 1 minute for issues and solution. Like when you highlight what the issues are and when you give what the solutions are. Rest 30 seconds for your conclusion, 30 seconds for your introduction. You can also add like 30 seconds of anecdote here, which basically means 1 minute, 130, 2 minutes, 30, which means you have 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I think. So 3 minutes, 30 seconds for your.
Okay, and can we start with a negative tone?
What negative tone do you mean? Like aggression or emotion?
Yes, emotion.
Yeah, you can, obviously.
Okay.
The only issue is if you think that the only issue is when you start on like a lower tone, for you to, so you'll have to immediately like transition to something which is like on a higher tone as well, so that like it shouldn't be like completely low key. It should somehow like it should have some
No,
rise
like
and
we can start with the lower tone, with a negative tone at the start, and then we can move towards a positive tone and
yeah,
high tone.
go ahead with that. Yes, yes. Just don't make it stagnant. Yes, Donna.
Okay.
Okay, so I had a question that is it better to have like humor or be strong like Greta Thunberg in a speech?
Oh, depends on what issue you have. So if you think there is just absolutely no way you can have humor, then just don't use it. Like, don't force your humor into it. But I think humor is a very good way of engaging people. Because I think most people, and specifically for people who are new to original oratory, they tend to have like a Greta Thunberg way of like speaking, which becomes very stagnant for a judge, because like a judge is literally seeing people like screaming at mic they want to see voice modulation. I think voice modulation, emotion changing in the speech itself. So I think humor, sadness, anger, passion, you can like literally have a mix of everything in your speech at once. So that's what I would suggest.
So it's more preferably to have humor, right?
Yeah. Like I would say if I were your judge, I would absolutely give you extra points for humor.
Okay, thank you.
Sake.
Ma'am, I'm actually raising my hand to tell you my concluding statement, ma'am.
Tell me.
Ma'am, so I've prepared one line only, ma'am, and it is so to conclude. I think that in a truthful society, it will reflect on each of its members to be content, courageous, and competent, ma'am.
So that's your closing statement. Fine, that's fine. Okay, so I'm gonna end
Ma'am, I
today.
also have a question, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
I wanted to know, can we quote anything in other languages?
If you think the language is known to the judge, for example, what language do you want to use, Sakitra?
Sanskrit, ma'am. Or Tamil.
But
Sanskrit.
are you gonna also explain what the meaning of that is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, then it's okay. Any language, then it's fine. All right. Do you have like a rhetoric, like a funny statement that you listen to anytime whenever you listen to, let's say, things like law? Like the immediate thing that comes to my head is Tariq pe Tariq, you know? Madhu, do you have anything? You were unmuted.
Same, ma'am. I was going to say.
Yeah, now everybody has this idea, so you can't.
And ma'am, I have a question. Like,
Yeah.
when we are going with a sub-theme for the seniors,
Yeah.
it's like how can we reform law in context of changing society? So we have to
Yeah.
give a particular example at the start of our speech after the intro, and then we have to form arguments on the basis of that particular example. And
Your
forward the
example
speech.
could be just either a general example or just an example on all the other issues that you're going to talk about. So it doesn't have to be like related to everything. For example, the example that he set up for the context was BLM, but he talked about other issues as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Niyati?
Yes, ma'am. So I had a query about senior sub-theme only. So I wanted to ask, like, we need to reform one existing law, right? So in our main body, so we need to give I mean, we could give like 3 to 4 analytical benefits to the benefits it does to the society, right? That's what actually we need to do.
You need to find why. So your body has to have the problem existing with that particular area that you have found out. I really want to use examples, but that's going to remove your ability to, like use that example, which is why I'm not trying to give example. But you know what? If anyone has a specific idea, I would want to love to listen to it in my personal DM. So you can just like, if you're just like thinking about if you're on the right track, or not, just text me. I'm gonna just probably, if I really hope I get time, but I'm gonna probably like tell you if you're in the right direction at least. I can't help you make your speeches, but I will help you if you're in the right direction.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, just a confirmation once again. So, in my body, I should mention that why that existing law should change, and if it's like modified, how will it benefit the society, right?
If it is modified, how will it benefit society? Yeah.
All right, ma'am.
But
Thank you.
most importantly, why that problem exists. So,
Okay.
no, I don't want to give you example. Okay.
No
Um,
problem.
Yeah, like because I just don't want you to get biased towards that example.
Yeah, no problem, ma'am.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording, and then if you have more questions, you can anyway.